All right, we're looking for that new pope. Is there a consensus? Is there a gridlock? I'm here with my friend George Farmer, who I interviewed last year, and we talked about his time at Oxford, his conversion to Catholicism. Of course, many of you know him as the husband of Candace Owens, and he's in St. Peter's Square. George, I can see the dome, I can see the obelisks. You're there. What's going on the ground?
You can see the very unglamorous press corps behind me as well.
Yeah.
Um, it's busy. I'll tell you, there's a lot of expectation right now. You can just sort of feel people starting to trickle back into the square, having left after the black smoke we saw earlier today. The mood on the ground, I would say, 3 votes in, because obviously they didn't release black smoke after the second vote, given that no pope was elected in the second scrutiny either. I think that people, from just judging by what I was kind of informed observers, they were basically making the point that after 3 votes, it seems, unlikely that Paraline has grabbed it in the first few rounds, which, is probably a good thing, I would say. Obviously, we don't want him to be Pope, but it could still be him, of course. We could still come to the end of the day and discover that he's been made the Pope, but it seems unlikely that that first vote or the second or third vote went to him, obviously. So it just seems like there's maybe a second horse coming up in the race, perhaps, or there's somebody there who has blocked his election early on.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking, you need 45 votes to block Parolin. And so it's very clear that they have that 45 and they're sustaining that 45 going into the fourth vote.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, we're expecting if there is a vote which where the election is confirmed, we will see white smoke from the Sistine Chapel, probably in the next 30 minutes, because 5:30 is kind of roughly the time that the results of the fourth vote are expected. If there isn't a pope elected in the fourth scrutiny, then we won't get any smoke at all, and we'll only get smoke after the fifth ballot, which we're expecting that at around 7 o'clock, 7:30. Obviously, last night's was a lot later than expected. In part, that's probably because there are a lot of cardinals who don't know their way around this place and probably still getting used to the setup. So, we didn't get results last night until after 9 o'clock, which was a lot later than people were expecting. Obviously, everyone was expecting votes kind of around 7 to 8 p.m.
Yeah. I think the most opportune time to announce a pope is on the fourth ballot because you have basically Europe, Africa, and the North and South Americans all awake at that time. Do you think we're going to see it here soon?
Um, I'm going to say no, and then watch the one graph behind in like 15 minutes. But I don't think so. If I'm honest, I think that now we've kind of got past the first three. I, a lot of people seem to be saying it could be today. It's going to be today. A lot of people seem to be saying it's going to be the fifth vote. Um, that would the results at as I said, about 7 to 8 p.m. this evening. I'd be very surprised if it was the fourth vote, just because there's just there's so much political machinations going on right now, and if they've managed to kind of hold blocks together and potentially maneuver people within those first 3 votes, I don't see that being settled by the fourth. I think it's far more likely it's going to take some more votes to get across the line.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've heard that going into the first ballot, the conservatives were not behind Sarah or Burke for strategic reasons, but they went in behind Erdo going into the conclave. Have you heard that same idea?
No, that's actually the first I've heard of that. I
Okay.
I hadn't heard that they were behind Odo. That's interesting. Um, I mean, one thing which seems to be one of the kind of big news pieces on the ground over here, which, I think you covered this a couple of days ago, which I thought was kind of interesting and has definitely got a little bit of traction, is that, um, there was America Week last week in Rome. And I think that that's very interesting and quite relevant because there's been quite a bit of press coverage about how obviously the Vatican is in deep financial trouble. The pilgrims have stopped coming to Rome. No one's giving money to the church. There's kind of a big financial black hole. And yet last week, you had, I don't know how many tens of billions landing on various private jets to come and basically, talk about the Catholic faith in America. You had Papal Foundation here. You had a lot of high net worth individuals come in. And there's a sense, from what I can gather, of talking to journalists who are here on the ground and talking to a couple of other people who are here during America Week, that there's kind of got to be a pope that they want to give money to. And that sounds pretty transactional, but one doesn't get the impression that much money flowed into the Vatican coffers whilst Francis was on the papal throne. And so if there's going to be a pope that they want to support, it's kind of got to be somebody who's orthodox and who gets behind the American church. And the American church, as you well know, obviously you've been a major voice on this, has been deeply traditional or is moving towards the traditional side. So that actually gave me quite a lot of hope in some ways, because I think, okay, that could be interesting. The Americans are trying to use their muscle a bit more. Basically, say, look, we don't want the Francis. We don't want the kind of, don't want the Asian France. We don't want the Francis. We want a more traditionally minded.
Yeah. For those same reasons, George, I've heard people in America floating Cardinal Dolan. He's Archbishop Cardinal of New York. He knows a lot of deep pockets, a lot of millionaires, a lot of billionaires. I don't see that as a possibility. Do you see that as a possibility?
No, absolutely not. I think it's almost, I would say that there's a geopolitical reason. There's obviously an ecclesiastical reason. The ecclesiastical reason is I don't think Dolan has the numbers right in the conclave. We just don't really see him as a front runner. Don't see him as a major contender. He wasn't papibile. And then the kind of geopolitical reason I see him as a non-starter is just because it would be incredibly. I think the College of Cardinals would be very negatively viewed if they elected the Pope from the dominant world superpower as Pope. It would give America both hegemony over kind of political world affairs and also church affairs. So, that would just be kind of a double whammy of power, which I think the Cardinals would be very reluctant to do, especially as you've seen in the last, 5 years, this kind of emerging multipolarity world order, where Russia and China have obviously challenged the US's position. And you're seeing more states kind of choose their alliances, whereas before it was obviously pretty much just kind of one hyperpower. It was just America. And now you're seeing that kind of fragmentation of power. So I think the Cardinals would be very reluctant to align the church with the dominant superpower of the world, especially in kind of revised multipolarity world order that we've seen emerge.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. So that really puts us on to, I think, probably Pizzaballa or Erdo. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the longer it goes, the more I definitely think that Pete Zabala has a shot. Um, I view him, I guess my position on him would have been like he wasn't kind of like bucket one. What he's kind of bucket one, like A minus, if you know what I mean. He's the top A candidates were sort of, that's your Erdos, that's your Paralines, obviously. And the longer we go, if we get to this evening, well, we don't get smoke, here in the next 20 minutes. And that means they've also gone through the fourth vote without a result. The more votes we have without a result, I do feel more confident that someone like a Pizza Bala, who is a kind of, I don't want to say an A minus candidate, but not in terms of quality, but just in terms of, electability, if you want to call it that. I think that he definitely has more of a shot the longer we go on, because he's also going to take a while to garner the support just because he's so unknown.
Yeah. He's unknown. He's young. He's definitely been a popular front runner, but like you said, he's kind of between. He's neither a front runner nor a second row. And I could see the liberals coming around him because he does have aura. He does have a persona. I think he would bring money and donations and pilgrims back to Rome. They desperately need that. He hasn't positioned himself as like, you know, incredibly trad like Burke or Sarah. So both sides could compromise. I think we've seen that there's a gridlock. There's not a consensus, so there's going to be a compromise candidate. Pizza Balla may be that man.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course that's, that would be, I think that would be a very good result. I mean, the general mood here amongst a lot of people, and this is more the clerical mood rather than the kind of journalistic mood. The clerical mood over here seems to be exhaustion,
Hmm.
and relief to some extent. Like a lot of clerics, seem to be kind of approaching people in the traditional world, being like, "Love what you're doing, love what you're saying, keep up the good work. We know you've been fighting the good fight." There seems to be more of a clerical engagement, and I was talking about from, cassock wearing priests who are more sort of we can see them from afar, and we know they're probably on our side. But we're talking bishops and even archbishops, who seem to have been more supportive and just coming up to traditionally minded people and saying good things. That sense you're getting is like we don't really want to go back to the way that we just. We don't want to go back to the way of saying like, okay, we're just going to have another Francis and kind of business as usual. So I think from that perspective, it's kind of positive, and I do think that a lot of people are saying we want a centrist. We want somebody who's going to restore order, restore canon law, and that seems to be the kind of general mood over here right now.
Yeah. Are you hearing much talk on the streets and in the churches about Tagle or Aveline or Gresh or any of those sort of second row, more progressive candidates?
Yeah, so I mean, I think typically I think it's interesting because I get a bit nervous, I guess, when people say that he's written off. As soon as you have people saying he's written off, then I get nervous because if we start discounting someone who's sorry, then they come through as something less than illusion. But I think from the perspective of that being people who I believe that is something that people share. The Greg conversation has been up in the last couple of days. A lot of people talk about him, which I think is interesting. He was I had in the rankings up until a couple of days ago. He does set targets out of the race, but it seems to be that Gresh and Aveline still are kind of the liberal front runners in the second bucket conversation.
It would seem to me if they have the 45 vote block to block Parolin, they can retain that block to block out Tagle, Aveline, really anyone, as long as they can keep that block. That's very powerful. I'm more confident now that we've gone into the second day this far that the conservatives or the traditionals already have a veto block. I think that's really important. They just got to keep that moving into either today or tomorrow. I mean, do you think we'll see a pope tonight or tomorrow? What do you think?
I now that we've passed the third, I'm more inclined to say tomorrow. Uh, as I said earlier, like the smoke coming out right now, but I think we're going to see it tomorrow rather than today. I think we'll see it tomorrow. Think that it could be looking at a claim. There was a lot of discussion for the claim of this potentially being lost time. Again, just a lot of Cardinals, 130 votes. That's a big number you've got to get to win. Basically, how to unify the College of Cardinals behind you before you actually get votes to win this thing. I would be very surprised if they moved from first candidates and now still second ranked candidate by the end of.
Oh, we lost him. We lost George. The signal was getting a little buggy, and I was worried about that. So let me text him real quick, and we'll try to get George Farmer back in here, and hopefully we get a better. Use link again. Yeah, so it was a little bit hard to hear from George, but he was saying now that we're moving into the third, into the fourth ballot, they're now going to start looking at here he is, looking at the second row candidates. Bringing you in, George. Just a moment. Where is he? There he is. All right, we lost you. Your signal was getting kind of choppy,
Sorry.
and we lost you. How can you hear me? Okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay,
Sorry, it's
you sound better
as the
too.
increasing number of people come into the square, the service is getting a little bit worse. But
Yeah.
I'll try and go as long as I can. I was
Okay.
just saying that basically now that it definitely appears the first ranked candidates haven't been chosen in its first three ballots. It seems unlikely they're going to be able to secure a second ranked candidate by the end of today. There's going to be obviously that position. There's going to be just who's the liberal candidate in the second bucket. As we earlier said, like that could be Pizza for the Conservatives. Are they going to unite around him? For reasons that you and I have talked about in the past. I think he's an incredibly strong contender. He's older than Pope John Paul II was when he was elected. But of course, he is young. And so there will be a lot of cardinals who are saying, do I want basically this to be my final conclave if I elect this guy? So, there's big questions over Pizzaballa, but I do think that he has a strong horse in this race, particularly as kind of, as I said earlier, the A- candidate.
Yeah. And what you said there, it broke up a little bit. I don't know if the audience could hear it, but you said now that we're moving into the second row candidates, it's going to take several ballots to sift out those candidates and find the leading candidates that then go head to head into the ballot. So if we are moving to second row candidates, we could move into Friday, we could move into Saturday. I mean, it's going to take a while to fight that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, the conclave, they'll vote until the end of today and they'll vote until the end of tomorrow. Then they get a day off on Saturday and then they start again from Sunday.
Yeah.
So, if we don't get someone at the end of tomorrow, we're looking at the list we're going to have a post by midday on Sunday, basically. So, yeah, and of course, what does that signal to the world? It signals to the world that the church is quite divided, which is something that is really no secret to those of us who are active in the church and have witnessed the terrible tragedy really of the church being apart in the last few years because of progressive policy linked by the area.
Yeah. Your signal's getting a little choppy again. So I just want to close on one thing on your ideas. Here in America, people are Cardinal Sarah. Even today, I got on X and people are just Cardinal Sarah. I polled my audience before I went live here. Oh, we lost them. People are saying Cardinal Sarah, Cardinal Sarah. I'm going to get George back on just to sign off, but I'm curious of what people are saying over there in Rome. So let me get here. Call in, George, call in one last time to sign off. Here he is. Bringing him back in. As more and more people enter into St. Peter's Square, the cell reception gets weaker and weaker. So that's what's happening right now. It's been going on the last 2 days. There we go. I think there's getting too many people in the square and the signals are getting weaker. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's still pretty bad. All right, George. Well, we'll circle back. Maybe in the future, when we get some more information, we can send over to you and we'll have a better signal. But right now, you're frozen. I can't hear you. So I'm going to wrap up the show. Thanks for being on, George Farmer. Appreciate it. Congratulations on you and Candace having a new baby Roman. We wish you the best. We pray for you. Thanks for being on today. And again, I'll be doing some more. Oh, he's back. I'll be doing some more shows today. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like it. And all right, he's gone. We can't get him back on. Drats. So yeah, make sure you like it. Make sure you subscribe. Watch my video yesterday. My video yesterday on what was it called? It was called Black Smoke. Why the Gridlock? That video already has over 100,000 views. Watch that. I do a lot of analysis on what's probably happening in the conclave, and we'll link it here on the screen as well. So thanks for watching. Again, continue to pray your rosary every day for the selection of a new pope. Get on your knees, pray your rosary. And until next time, I'll be back today. All right. But until then, remember our Lord Jesus Christ is the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. God bless and Godspeed.